Welcome to the podcast, Lulu Brud.
Hi.
It is such a joy to connect with you. We met that one time in Alexandra's, I don't know, was it her apartment? Alexandra Roxo. She was a guest on the show also. And she was like, I don't know if she was giving you a healing and I was giving her a healing. And we were just in this soup of healing each other.
Oh, yeah.
I think our paths crossed for maybe 15 minutes. And then I started following you online and I couldn't stop.
Same to you.
Yay. Yay.
Long.
Will you do me a favor and introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course. My name is Lulu Brud. Do you want me to say what I do?
Yeah, I mean, anything you want to share. I mean, what you do is so interesting to me. Your advocacy work has been so inspiring. Your motherhood journey is something I would love to talk about. So however you want to frame it, you're always more than welcome.
Thank you. I feel like the last few years have been a lot of pivots, a lot of spin. But I am an actress, and in the last couple of years, stepped into more of my interior design arm, and yeah, it's been wild.
You were an actress on it. Was it Pretty Little Liars? Was that your big role?
That was the one I think that was probably predominantly recognized. Yeah, Pretty Little Liars. I did a couple episodes of Donovan and some other shows here and there.
Yes. Cool, so cool. And I know that when we first started following each other, you very often were, sharing your beautiful aesthetic around ritual and design. And recently, you pivoted to do that more full time. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that kind of was a pandemic pivot for me. We moved out of LA in 2020 accidentally and then kind of on purpose. We left for what we thought was going to be 2 weeks and went to Joshua Tree to stay at a house that I was working on that was about to be done. And then 2 weeks became 2 months, and 2 months has now been 2.5 years. And we no longer stay, and we live here full time.
Joshua Tree is so magical. I've never been, but Laura was just there, and I have a lot of FOMO because it seems like a really spiritual community, and also just like the natural beauty is just stunning. It's the desert, isn't it?
It's wild. It's so funny because at first glance it seems like so austere and like how could anything live here? But you have to go really soft focus on it, and there's so many beautiful, very distinct seasons out here, and so many things that grow, but you have to like look for them. And now that we've been through a few cycles of life here and seasons, like I love everyone for different reasons.
Well, you use the word wild, and I know that your son's name is Wilder, so we might as well introduce him.
He just turned 3 last week, and he is really, really stepping into his name.
He's really
starting to own his name.
Yes. I love that.
Yes.
Like he's like, oh, you know what, Laura, we hear your construction, just so you know. New York City, baby. Lulu, have you ever lived in New York City?
I haven't.
Or have you always been a West Coast?
I've been a West Coast girl. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast. And like New York was always super close. So I always thought I would end up in New York. But when I dropped out of college, I had more connections and friends in Los Angeles. So I was 19 when I moved to LA. So I had to go somewhere where I knew people. And I feel like I missed the boat on New York because at the time, it's very different now. You could be like, oh, I'll get like I have so much more house in LA than I would in New York. So I'm just going to go to LA and like not live in a closet. And now I think it's just
it's true though. I mean, it's like a real thing.
Yeah.
We live in way smaller quarters. I mean, there are benefits and, cost benefit analysis around all of it, but space wise, like it's legit. It's like, it's pretty real. So I wanted to talk to you about your advocacy around abortion is healthcare and how you came to that. I love the way you share it and how you engage your community around it. And I think now is a really important time to pass the mic to women like you who both have experience, passion, and have had real conversations around this issue. Because we need to hear, we need to hear from you, you know? And I'm just so grateful that you're willing to share and advocate for all women and our rights to choose.
It is, I feel that anyone who wants to have an abortion or needs to have an abortion should have the right to have an abortion. I say that as a mother who has a kid and knows what it takes and the toll it takes on you and your body. And my specific journey into that, I've always had that stance, but before my son Wilder was born, I was pregnant with a little girl in 2018. And I lost her at 7 months.
Wow.
And I mean, it's just like total nightmare situation. And I was not prepared to go through labor in any way, shape, or form. And for me, like just getting through the experience was the most important thing. Like, but at a certain point, it became about like my healthcare,
Yeah.
and my sanity.
Was that perceived, or was that what the doctors had sort of said, like your healthcare, meaning your body, was at risk at that point, or no?
I had a very bad experience, and I had contemplated at the time filing like a medical malpractice lawsuit with my doctor because it was so neglectful. But you know, it's been like, wow, almost like, how old would my daughter be? My daughter would be 4 in November. So it's been a minute now. So it just felt like a not great use of my energy. Basically,
Right. Yeah.
I had just come back from New York, actually. I had shot an episode of Donovan, and they had written me in as being pregnant, which is so lovely. I mean, you know, it's really challenging when you're pregnant to get work or it's anything other than like a pregnant person.
Well, even a pregnant person, they would just put on a prosthetic belly, and you know, and to have a job on Ray Donovan, which is a Showtime show, is like is a big deal in and of itself. The fact that they wrote in that you were pregnant says a lot about your relationship with them, your work, and your value to them, because it's not the norm. It's not the norm at all.
Because they had called my team saying, "Hey, we're going to bring her back. Can we soft pin these dates?" And I was like, "Do we tell them that I'm pregnant? Like, do we not tell them I'm pregnant?" They're like, "Let's just hold." And they finally called, and they were like, "So here's the deal. I mean, here's the thing. We have a sex scene for her. Just want to make sure that we're okay there." And I was like, I think you're going to have to tell them now that I'm pregnant.
How far along were you?
I was 7 months. I mean, I was like 6.5 months, I believe. Like, I shot it over. So, yeah, I was like 6.5 months pregnant when I was there.
Which looks a lot like maybe you had just gained weight. You know, like it doesn't necessarily, especially with the first pregnancy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you look pregnant. Of course, like I know this because I don't know your body actually, but I know this because I was also auditioning until I literally couldn't audition anymore, and working until I literally couldn't work anymore, until someone was like, "You are not invited into this room. In fact, please leave." You know, like I just like pushed tooth and nail, and I have this like smaller frame, but I'm curvy, and so I just like would always just be like, "I gained weight, what?" You know, but especially at 6 months, like it just looks like maybe you just like ate a big meal, or except that if you were naked.
Yeah. I was like, well, I guess
it doesn't look like a big meal. It looks like a ball, right?
Yeah.
Is that what it looked like? Okay.
And my boobs were huge. So I was like, well, they're never going to look this good again. So let's just do it.
Nice.
But so they kept it in. They like wrote it in, and
Wow.
it was really fun. I remember being like, this is my last like adventure solo, but like still not really solo because I was very pregnant. And went home. And when I got home from New York, my best friend had a baby shower that I had to throw for her. And so I remember I got home on like a Wednesday, and I told my husband, Justin, I was like, I'm feeling weird. I don't feel her moving as much as she was. And I did the thing where you like drink Coke and then you like wait to see if she starts kicking. And
Yeah, because usually like the cold water or caffeine and sugar would make the fetus move. Yeah.
So I convinced myself, I was like, okay, I think I felt her, just like convincing myself of the things I needed to hear.
Yeah.
I threw
Also, bubbles
bubbles
feel
are
like some
they do that.
gas. Like it's not just convincing. Like there were sensations, I'm sure, like a Coke. Anyway, just wanted to, it is confusing.
Oh, it is. It's totally. And,
Yeah.
Your mind will play tricks to convince you of what it is that you need to hear. And I called the doctor and I was like, I think I need to come in. And this doctor's office was closed on Fridays. So she was like, well, you'd have to go to the hospital. And that just felt so dramatic to me. So I had my best friend's baby shower that weekend. And then I had an appointment set up on Monday. So I waited until Monday and went in for my regular appointment. And I just felt like ill. I knew something was off.
Wow.
And yeah, just like it's been 4 years and I still get emotional.
It's emotional. I'm so grateful for you sharing.
Yeah. Yes, there was no heartbeat anymore. And the doctor at the time who I was seeing said, well, you can technically wait 2 weeks.
What?
And at that point, I had no fluid in my body. I had lost all of my fluid.
Like amniotic fluid? Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so every time I moved, I could feel her moving. And I was like, you want me to go 2 weeks like this? Like what? And she said
Before you labored? Before you labored?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or the other option was to go get induced and go to the hospital immediately. And I just couldn't get my head around that. And I was like, there has to be like another way. And she's like, well, I don't do that here. And I felt so judged for seeking another way because I just couldn't, like, I felt like I would have a complete breakdown if I had to do that. If I had to.
This is your OB?
Mm-hmm. And my friends were the ones that rallied around and made the calls. And, granted, I'm 28 weeks pregnant.
It's really pregnant. Yeah.
It's really pregnant. So they called around to multiple places, and the responses that we got, and this is in California, this is in Los Angeles, where we have access seemingly to abortion healthcare.
And this was in 2018?
Mm-hmm.
Right. This was also a different world where Roe v. Wade wasn't overturned. This was when it was quote unquote easy or
easy.
Streamlined. Right.
Yep. And here's the thing, my daughter was gone. Do you know what I mean? Like I was terminating. This was a medical abortion.
Yeah.
Like all medical abortions, but this would have been it wasn't a termination. My daughter was gone and people still wouldn't touch me.
It's such a shame that our videos are off. Like, I wish I could, look you in the eye and just let you know how much reverence I have for you in this experience.
Oh, thank you.
How much love I have for you, and how awful it is that OB is in that position. Oh, God, it really.
And still
It is
practicing.
just so unfair.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we found a doctor at UCLA that took my case and saved, my life. And I will never forget her. And I never heard from that OB. I never got a follow up like, hey, what did you decide to do? Are you okay? And that's where the medical malpractice would come in, because technically you're still their patient, you're still under their care. They should be checking in on you. And just because I had chosen to go about it in a different way that seemingly she wouldn't have chosen for herself or had judgment on, yeah, I felt uh, just very dismissed by her.
Just to clarify, the two options were either wait 2 weeks for a spontaneous
Mm-hmm.
labor slash miscarriage, right?
Yeah. Stillbirth.
Or stillbirth, my goodness. A stillbirth that you were, or go straight to the hospital right then to get induced.
Mm-hmm.
What was the third option? What were you seeking that was so upsetting to this
I was seeking an
person that
abortion.
has an abortion?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a C-section? Or was it like a DNC?
It's a D&E.
D&E. Okay.
That's like the step after a DNC.
Okay.
It's the
Wow.
same. It's a similar process from what I understand. I'm not a doctor, but it's technically like a later form of abortion, DNC.
It's just such a reminder, like, this isn't a gendered issue. Like, it's not that every woman understands the rights for women. This is a person, a doctor, whose job it is to make sure that you are first and foremost healthy of body and of mind. And she really missed the mark.
Yeah, it was super traumatic, and I was really lucky in some ways. Like, we had just finished doing her nursery. Like, it was
I
coming together.
remember.
So
Beautiful mural in her room, and you had announced her name. Yeah.
Well, actually, we didn't announce her name. We kept it secret for a long time, and we kept it. I think it was only maybe last year when I spoke her name, because
What is it?
It's Zella, Zell. We didn't. When you go through this experience, there's so much grief and shock. Like, you're just trying to like get through a day. We were presented with, at the hospital, which I also was not prepared for, was like her death certificate, because after a certain amount, you have paperwork. So we
after a certain amount of time in utero.
I believe it's 20 weeks, maybe 22 or 24, but I think it's 20. I want to say.
Lulu.
Yeah. So we had to, when we opted for a D&E, they said, you're like, they're making sure you're of sound mind and taking you through everything. And she's like, you probably won't get to have any part of her. She's going to be gone. I'm like, okay, because if you were to labor, you could hold your child. But like, I couldn't.
You couldn't, yeah. Of course you couldn't.
Some people can.
Some people can, and that's their choice too.
Yeah.
They should have the option, judgment free. To be a mother is like, oh my God. It's the most vulnerable experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the most vulnerable experience. We should be treated with care.
Yes. That's all it is. It's care. And the amount of, I hate being right and saying I told you so. I don't really. I kind of like when I'm having a moment of right, but like, I hate it in this situation, because the amount of people the amount of stories that are already starting to come out about women in states where they've totally taken abortion off the table, who are at risk of losing their life, who didn't have the option, who nearly died because they were forced into situations that they shouldn't have been forced into, in childbirth, like the hemorrhaging, like all the things that I've already started reading about. I'm like, yeah, guys, we knew that people were going to be dying. Like, it's a big deal,
It's a big
like
deal.
it's healthcare. That's all it is.
I mean, it's just like, when I hear you, all I can think is like, that's torture.
Yeah.
Like, that's torture. What, when we have the ability
It's
to
just stupid.
provide dignity to not only you, but your unborn child, your
Yeah.
husband,
Yeah.
your community, why would we not provide that? That's torture.
Yeah. It's like, we know that people think so little of women or people with uteruses to begin
That's right.
with. So it's like, oh, cool. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. What else? What else you got?
Right, but it's being perpetuated by another woman, right? Like the judgment, right?
Yeah. From my doctor.
Like, that's wild to me. That's
Yeah.
wild to me that it's being perpetuated by our own.
Yeah.
So how did you grieve? And you still are. I see, and I hold space for in like the most loving way, really. How do you even start grieving in that situation?
I mean, it's a process. It's perpetual, like you said, like there's like moments that'll hit me still, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and it makes pregnancy after like really challenging because the whole time you're afraid. So it's
Yeah.
like, I feel like some people just step into pregnancy and love it and love being pregnant and love that experience. And I found that with Wilder, I had so far to go before I passed that threshold of 7 months.
Wow.
I have like a mantra of, this is different. This time is different. This time is different. So I didn't compare everything to my prior experience or be waiting for the shoe to drop or, you know.
Yeah. That takes so much bravery.
I mean, yeah, there's what's wild is having been through it. What I learned when I was going through it is that I felt so alone.
Yeah.
Um, and like, why me? Why, like this, but what I learned is that it's actually very common.
Tell
And
me.
I met so many people through this experience and was introduced to so many people because I needed a story to like hold on to have hope, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but was just like introduced to so many people who had lost very late. And because it's something that we don't hold space for in our society, we don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about grieving. We don't want to talk about the uncomfortable things that are supposed to be in shadow and in dark. And it's like, you're not supposed to announce that you're pregnant until you're 12 weeks or whatever. And it's just like, that
That's right.
just constantly puts women in a place of having to hold the secret. We don't want to know if you lose it. We don't want, like, I want people to celebrate, when they get to announce that. And I want also for them to be held in their grief, not to have to be like, well, nobody knew that I was, so then now I got to hide this thing. I got to hide my grief. I just think it's such a, unfortunately, common thing. So,
And it's systemic, right? Because it's like we are so uncomfortable with grief that we can't let it process.
mhm.
We can't let it process. And it's like what I was saying about like turning the video back on for the listener. We were having some tech issues where we thought maybe it was better for us to keep the video off just so that we could hear each other better. But like, really, a story like this is meant to be shared holding hands. looking, at the very least, looking each other in the eye. You know, like a story like this is to be held with reverence and love. And I mean, to be celebrated for the amount of resilience you have to bring another child into the world, to advocate for women, to even utter the story, not because it's something at all to be at all ashamed about, but just to have the courage to visit it again.
Oh yeah.
Just to have the courage to visit the imagery and the feelings. And what you and I both know as storytellers is that this is how we heal.
Yes.
This is how we do it. We tell the story. We tell the story to a person who's not afraid of my grief.
Yeah. You have to tell it so that it doesn't have like power over everything or dictate everything in your life, you know?
In the right time, obviously. You know,
Sure.
you took some time before you were public about it. Is that right?
I took a little bit of time. The odd thing, I mean, it's funny. My best friend and I were 5 weeks apart.
Wow.
She is very much in the public eye, and when everything happened, we ended up. My husband and I left our apartment because we couldn't we didn't want to be in there, and our friends sort of broke down the nursery and had our house deep cleaned and put food in our fridge because we just couldn't function. And in a way, I'm really glad that we didn't have children yet because we could be messy with our grief, because I don't even know how that would dictate how you grieve if you had another child already here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was staying at my best friend's house and I was getting tagged in all of these pictures that she had been photographed by a paparazzi or something, and she was super, super pregnant. People were like, oh my God, it's wild. You guys are pregnant at the same time. It's so crazy. And they didn't know that at that time I was upstairs having a panic attack, recovering from my loss while I'm getting sent and tagged in all these pictures of her being pregnant.
Wow.
And I love her daughter. Her daughter will always be 5 weeks older than my daughter. And Wilder was actually born. They're a day. Her daughter and Wilder are a day apart.
That's awesome.
It's wild.
A day and a year, you say?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that I think I probably took a week and a half or 2 weeks before I said anything. But I definitely felt pressure to speak to it because
you had been open about it up until that point. I mean, not that I just wanted to tell the listener what I know is that, what you are a storyteller and also in the public eye. And so I'm sorry for that pressure. I wanted to give context.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine.
It's totally
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I took a minute. I took a beat, but I felt like it had to be spoken. It would have been weird if I mean, literally nothing else felt
like anything was happening.
like I had anything to say besides that. I'm like, I don't. This is where I've been to hell and back.
Was it helpful to share it that early on, do you think?
I found it.
And to feel people's love and community around you?
Yeah, I felt really, really held. And like I said, by speaking about it, I had so many people reach out to me about their own losses, or hey, when you're ready, I have somebody you can talk to. And now, I sort of act as that person for other people. I get people reach out to me. I would say once a month, I get somebody messaging me about a leak with a friend of theirs. Yeah.
And do you like when people reach out to you about it?
Sometimes it catches me at a time that's not great for me, you know,
Yeah, of course I
but
know.
so I remember what it felt like to be held by strangers who just let me cry and talk and held space for me, and that could be examples to me of people that got on the other side of it.
Hmm.
And so I had these people for me, and I can be this person for this other person at this time.
Well, besides that one-on-one support that you give other people, which I know is so nurturing to you. I know you're already like such a nurturing person, but you also have been advocating sort of en masse. How has that been?
It's maddening.
Yeah.
I mean, I've shared my experience so many times to give people context. And like I said in the beginning, you want to get an abortion, you get an abortion. You don't need to give any context for why you have an abortion, right? Like I love, there's so many great accounts that I think Shout Your Abortion is one of them. It's like that give stories and explanations for this. And it's like, you don't need to have any, people don't need any reason. They don't need to offer any reason to anybody for what they do with their body. But I like to share my story with context so that people understand.
Yeah.
Definitely gotten into it with people on my Instagram before. They're
Really?
typically men. What? Um, and I remember when I was saying, I think this was like a year ago when I shared this story again. And I was like, look, I had a DNC, and people love to tell me that, or a DNE, I'm sorry. And people love to tell me that that's not what they're talking about, that stuff's still going to be on the table. People will still be able to get that. And I'm like, no, they won't. And I've been screaming this for so long, and now it's happening. And I'm like, nah. Remember when I said this was going to happen?
It's happening.
It's
I didn't see
happening.
it
And
coming. I didn't see it coming. I'm sorry that I didn't see it coming, but I didn't see it coming. And that's the truth of that.
well, it's
You
like we
saw it
live in these,
coming.
right? In theory.
Right.
And what's scary is that you know, if the Republicans take over, then they want to make it a nationwide ban. So there won't be anywhere safe.
You know, that's petrifying. You know, when I listened to you, and we had one other guest come on to talk about her abortion, and even then, I like hesitated to call it an abortion because the child was growing up normally and all this, and it's an abortion, so we should call it that
Medical. It's
for her. Yeah, right. And you know, here we are talking, telling the stories, and I just like you said, it's like we don't need to go through torture. We don't need to be tortured for this to
no.
be a necessity, you know? And you know, what's interesting is that I have several friends who have had abortions, family members, and electively, early on. And you know, I haven't been able to have them on because there's still a stigma even within oneself, even within my own progressive community, where they just don't want to talk about it. They feel ashamed.
Yes.
And I am
Yes.
so sorry for that because there is no shame. We need not go through torture, like literal, actual medical torture to make this valid.
And what's wild to me, it just feels like, why are we moving backwards? We have the technology. It saves
Right.
lives. To look at a woman and say, I'm sorry, I can't help you, when you very well could, just feels like medical abuse.
It is medical abuse, Lulu.
Yes.
You opened this conversation with a conversation with a neglectful doctor. I don't know what was going through that person's mind, but that was abuse.
Yeah.
That is wild. And it's, you know, it's so crazy because it's like she owes you money. She owes you therapy money.
Oh,
She fucking owes
no.
you money. She owes you money for that move. She owes you. I just, I'm being spiteful.
But that's the game I play in my head. Like, I could have medical malpracticed her, but I'm happy. I have my son. We got through it in the way that we got through it, and we. I think I was going to speak to this about her name. We had her death certificate that we got. You get asked like right after surgery, do you have a name? Like, what would you like for this to say? And you're like, I'm just coming out of surgery. Like, what? So on her
Did you get a
death
birth certificate? Did you get a birth certificate also?
No, just a death certificate.
Wow.
Because it was a stillbirth. This was, I like blocked this out. On her death certificate, it says cause of death and it says termination. Because we can't let a moment go by without making a person feel shame for how they chose to pass their child. It was not a termination. My daughter
she was gone.
Yes. But according to medical terms, which need to change, much like geriatric pregnancies, it needs to change. And we didn't want to give her name because in some corner of our mind at the time, we were like, she's going to come back, this is her name. So we held it back and it just says baby girl. I didn't even think that I would have to like fill out a death certificate. But we did get her footprints, which I remember just like breaking down crying when they brought them in because they had prepared me so wholeheartedly for not having anything.
Oh my God.
And my son will actually will walk by them and give them kisses sometimes.
His sister.
He's funny. Like he's just started sort of talking about her and like, oh, I have a sister, It's really
It's
sweet.
so great that you integrate that into his life because that's the truth,
Yeah. He has he's got guardian.
Yeah. And you were a changed mother for him. You had a baby before him, He is the second child. That is his biography.
And it's so funny because it's like a gauge whether I really want to interact with people or not because, you get that question all the time, which is a question that I don't ask people after going through this experience is like, oh, do you have more than one kid? Or is this your only child? And sometimes I will say, no, I lost a daughter, because I like to honor her. But like sometimes I don't want to engage with people and give them the whole thing. So I just say yes, but it's such a loaded question for me. It's not just like a flippant. Well, how many kids do you have? Well,
thank you for sharing that. I don't know if I asked, but I'll be more mindful now that I spoke to you, and I'm sure the listener will too, because it's such a normal thing to ask. It's such a, but we don't know, and it doesn't matter. for my grocery interaction, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. I have I do family constellations. Like I have a sort of certificate in it, and it's a healing modality.
I didn't know you had that.
Yeah, I've done like a bunch of. I don't know. I don't always practice it, but in the family constellation, abortions and miscarriages and stillbirths and loss of loved ones are in the family constellation. So it would be mom and dad and Sella and Wilder. That's the family. That's the family. Yeah. So it's like a really beautiful thing for a child. According to this, line of thinking, which I think is a really beautiful resource. But according to family constellation, it's always really important for the living children to know where they stand in the constellation.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. How long did it take before you got pregnant again?
We, anybody who, well, I don't want to speak for anybody. When I went through this, all I wanted was to be pregnant again. I was like, I just want what was gone, like what's gone. Because, like your milk comes in and you have to go through all of and I was just like, you're so aware that you're so empty after feeling the kicks of your child and going through this whole process. And for me, like, oh my God, we were almost there. We were almost there. And now I have to go back and like do this all over again. But we decided we wanted to get through that year. And also, typically, your doctor will recommend you waiting. I think it was like 8 weeks or 6 weeks or something to just even start.
The uterus lining needs to replenish.
Yeah, so that you don't have another situation. And for us, we had a really bad year. We lost our dog. We announced we were pregnant on Mother's Day. Our dog, my sweet little girl who was like 10 years old, she died the next day. We were on a vacation.
Sorry.
I held her when she passed. Like, I'm really grateful for the experience of getting to walk through that with her. But I just remember sobbing in my bed after losing Zella, being like, we have nothing. We have nothing. Like, our dog was gone. Our daughter was gone. So I was like, I don't think I need to get like just on even ground. So that happened. We lost Zella in August. And something that I recommend people doing, because it was very helpful for me, was doing a, God, what did I call it?
Was it a ritual?
It's we called it a due date escape. And so Justin and I had been talking about like, how does it feel to be here in our apartment? I was like, icky, awful, want nothing to do with it. I don't want to be here. We have to go somewhere. We have to get out of here. And we have to reconnect because we've been through trauma. So we went to Hawaii on her due date for like a week or something and just got out of town. And we got to honor the ceremony and honored her and did the whole thing. And that was in November. She was due on November 4th. And then
it's coming up.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
And then we started trying again in like January, and I think it took right away because Wilder was born in October.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah. And clearly I had a new doctor this time. I never went back to see that other doctor.
Thank fucking God. I hope she never practices medicine ever again. She must have been under some serious duress. I mean, maybe she like pulled an all-nighter and had some sort of horrible life situation to behave that way.
I want to agree with you. For a long time, I was like, I don't know, maybe we caught her on a bad day. And then I was like, that doesn't explain why she never called to check up on me.
That's right. Well, then we know that it's not about her. Then we know that it's a system that would employ her and support her, and that we would even question if we would win a medical malpractice suit.
Right. Right.
And then we wonder, wait, I mean, I feel like I sound like a squeaky wheel when I'm like, because we hate women. but
it just keeps coming back to that.
It does, doesn't it? It does, doesn't it? Except here, I think that this is a form of resistance. I do believe telling your story. If you can, there are people who cannot. Totally. There are people who cannot. There are people, even like my friends, who have had elective abortions and are riddled with shame. That is a toxic, horrible, horrible cocktail of hormones and emotions. There are people who cannot. You have the strength. You have the wherewithal. Somehow to tell the story.
That's why I feel like I I have to talk about it is because I can. And I know that there are plenty of people who feel like deep shame about their experiences.
Mhm.
I know why, because so many religions are made to only make you feel shame. You know,
It's a great way to control you.
yeah, my whole extended family and, you know, they're very religious
Mm.
on one side of my family. And I remember when I was going through this, I was sharing everything that I was going through and the medical options that I chose for my daughter and for myself and for my sanity. And still, they continue, even knowing me and knowing what I went through and knowing how traumatic that experience was, still take the side of absolutely no, never, never abortions. No, God, it's against God's will. And I'm like,
Oh my
where?
god.
I don't see that anywhere.
Wow.
And that, you know, I mean, I forget what state it's in. Is it Arizona? There's a bunch of Jewish people in Arizona, maybe, who were filing lawsuits against the state for, you know, messing with their religion. And I'm like, yes, yes,
Yes.
because it's not just one. I mean, it is a nation of Christianity, whatever
Right.
that means.
Right, but we're here for religious freedom. That's what we're
Yes,
here for.
that's how this country was formed.
So,
How do we?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, not to by any means sidestep the mind boggling confusion, outrage of it all. But I do know that you have been so active in this field. And if there are, if you have resources or calls to action for us to make any progress,
Yeah.
please share. Yeah, you're welcome to share. And if today is about this testimony for us to know what's going on, to lift the veil,
Yeah.
that's also more than more.
I wish I had taken a moment before coming on to write down a lot of stuff. I mean, I follow Busy Phillips and I love
Hmm.
her. She does a lot of work around abortion and healthcare. And so she shares resources all the time. So if you ever have a second, check out her Instagram. I believe she has a lot of stuff on there.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's constantly, you know, pushing back. I have waves of it. I have waves where I get so angry and it motivates me to be super active about it. And I have times like this current moment in time where I feel so angry, but also so sad. And I feel so debilitated because I'm just like, how are we here?
Yeah, yeah.
And I
I
know,
think well, I think we know how we're here. We just can't
yeah,
stay here. Um, I think it's important for us. I keep saying this is important. This is important. Shut up, Rabani. I think I think the outrage is probably the first step.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, we should get resources to make a change, and that's true. And we'll put that in the show notes.
yes,
But I think today is about the absolute outrage that a person could be treated that way. A person. You happen to have a uterus. And what's crazy is that like this world would not go round if there weren't women making people.
yeah,
So I think the outrage is absolutely the first step. I really do. I think like we are allowed to leave this hour of talking and be overwhelmed and outraged and sad. And that is actually progress because otherwise we're lying to ourselves about what's going on here.
yeah, yeah. And it makes me terrified to think that there's a world in which it could all be taken away and our daughters won't have that same access to that kind of medical. Because if I don't want to say when, but if it gets overturned, when it gets overturned, it's going to take a long time to get back to just where we were. Not even progressing beyond that, but just to get back on like even ground. So we can't let it happen.
Lulu, I was so in denial that this is even an issue when I was seeing your posts in 2018.
Yeah. And like I said, I live in a progressive state and a progressive city.
You live in California.
Yeah, I lived in.
I mean,
and the things that we were told, like, bring a bag of cash and go to this back alley in San Francisco. I'm like, okay, I guess I got to get all this cash and drive to San Francisco. And like, this is California.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. I really like to wrap these things up with a nice little bow because that's my job, right? I'm the host.
Yeah. Good.
And I just don't think that's possible. And that's health care.
Mm-hmm.
That's mental wellness, is that this is a tragedy, personal tragedy, that's for sure, but also a tragedy for our society.
Yeah.
That we could let this go and not tell these stories for fear of the truth,
Mm-hmm.
for fear of the grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish I could hug you.
Oh, I wish I could hug you too.
I wish I could hug you. I think it's really amazing. Like, technology is so cool that we get to even hang out at all. And there's a time for hugs, and the time is now.
I know.
I'm hugging you. Yeah. I'm hugging you.
Thank you for having it.
Thank you for sharing your beautiful story, your cello with us.
Of course. Thank you for.
And your wilder too.
Oh, yeah. Wild one. Appreciate.
We very often have actresses on because, you're my people. I do think like there's something so beautiful about how you hold the grief and the higher mind at the same time. You can hold the grief and you can hold the importance at the same time. And I'm genuinely grateful.
Oh, thank you.
Deeply, deeply grateful for you.
Thank you.
Where can we find you, by the way? Where can we find your beautiful work?
Yeah, on Instagram, because old, and I'm not on TikTok except to just look at people.
Oh boy, ditto.
I am at Lady Lou of the Wolves, Lady LU of the Wolves. That was my first handle when I got on Instagram, and now I'm verified, and I can't change it to save my life. So I guess I'm stuck. My website is nothing of which to speak of at this point in time, but it's in my Instagram handle if you want to check it out one day when it's done. It's where all my.
But you're active on Instagram. I see your design work. I see your sweet, sweet boy. I see your heart. I see your cute face and your style. I see you, and I'm sure that there are people out listening right now who want to reach out. So thank you for letting us in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.